In this tape, we're going to look at the difference between citations and references and how to cite something properly in your work. Citation is a mark in the text that points to the reference, but doesn't contain all of the information about it. The references themselves, including the journal, the pages, the title, all of that detailed information is found at the end of the document or the end of whatever section you're working with. That's where the full reference is found. Now, there are two basic citation and reference styles. In science, we typically use what's called the author date style, where in parentheses, you'll have the author, comma, date of publication of whatever that is. However, in engineering, they often use a different format, a numerical format, where in square brackets or sometimes other formats, they'll have a number, and the number then refers to something in the reference section. Now, the reference styles similarly are different. So in science, with the author date format, the references are listed by the author's family name in alphabetical order. However, in engineering, they're listed by the number of the reference, and each reference is listed only once. So if you refer to the same reference a second time, you use the same number as the first time that you referred to it. And those then are just sorted by number and should be sequential through the whole document. Now note, as you see on these examples, that these are indented in order to make it easier to find each individual reference. Now again, Google Scholar can help you to download the references in the proper format. So if you go back to the Google Scholar and you click on Cite, it will bring up this separate text box that shows 5 different citation formats. MLA is used primarily in humanities. APA is used quite broadly in social science and sciences. The other formats listed there are used mostly for books. Now, engineering is not listed because there are so many different engineering formats, and many science journals also have different individual formats. But for now, let's start with APA as a good basic science format. You can do 2 things with this. One is you can copy that APA format and then just copy it into your Word document or whatever, PowerPoint, whatever you're working with. If you do that, then you have to do the alphabetizing, putting them in the right order, and indenting yourself using the format functions. You can also use a reference manager to do that for you. Down at the bottom, you'll see something that says EndNote. And if you click that, that will download an EndNote reference. We'll talk about that in the final tape in this series. But again, there are different variations on the citation that you may wind up seeing as well. For instance, you may not use a graph or a figure directly the way it is in the original publication, but you still need to cite it. If you redrew it, you say redrawn from. If you modified it in some way, you say modified from, and then cite it by the author and date as you normally would. Sometimes, again, particularly with human resources, you may talk to an individual. You may go to a workshop. You may email someone. And in those cases, you don't have a standard reference. So you cite that by the person's name as a source, followed by a comma, personal communication. But no matter what, if you get information from another source, you have to cite where that's from. Now, the citations look a little bit different in different documents. So in PowerPoint, within your text on the page, you use the standard citation format, author, comma, date, in parentheses. And then on a separate page at the end, you list all the references in standard reference format. With a video, similarly, on the page, in the place, in the text where you refer to it, you use the standard citation format, author, date, and then the references would be in a list at the end of the video. For a poster or a web page, it's a little bit different because those are individual pages. And so on a poster, you'll have the citation in the text wherever it is on the poster, and then there's usually a little box down at the bottom that will list all of the references. And similarly with a web page, you would have the author date in the text, or perhaps a footnote mark, a 1 or a 2. And then down at the bottom, you would have the references at the bottom of that web page. So one of the questions that a lot of students have is, when do you need a citation and when don't you need a citation? So what do you tell your students? When do you need a citation?
In humanities and social sciences, a lot of times we feel this is something new to me and I thought about it myself, but we don't realize a lot of things have already been done. That's why we need to find our founding fathers to see if somebody else has already said something. So this is something I already mentioned before. We need to ask experienced scholars and take a course to find out those people who laid the foundation. But what's also important in humanities and social sciences is how you cite somebody. The style you mentioned, author date, citation style, usually it comes at the end of a sentence. You describe this phenomenon or this whatever theory, then you put parentheses citing those people who share the same idea. But there's another way which is called integral citation. In other words, if we want to talk about different models in curriculum design, one way, if you want to foreground the author, you will say, Rao, 2022, proposed a model of curriculum design. That's integral citation. But if you don't want to foreground this author, you just think this idea is more important than who raised the idea, then we will use the model you talked about in non-integral citation. So we describe this theory and then in parentheses at the end, citing author and date.
We'll talk more about that actually later in the course as we talk about writing and how to improve your writing, how to use different integral or non-integral citations and different things that you can do to highlight or background or talk about your opinion of different authors. One of the things that we find in science is that often there's general knowledge, that there's a lot of things have been done, and whereas in social science, you'll often list 5 or 10 people who have done work on a similar thing. If it's generally known and accepted in science, sometimes we won't have a citation. So again, there's a difference from field to field in how many citations are considered necessary, particularly for things that are well accepted in a field or common definitions.
So the purpose for our field in humanities and social sciences to cite somebody is also to show I am knowledgeable and I have comprehensive understanding of my field by citing those important figures.
But if you have any particular data from another source, you talk about particular methods or anything that is specific to one particular approach, one particular paper, you definitely have to have a citation.